Good morning, and we're in chapter 7 today, and we're going to continue building the house of the Lord, even though it said, Solomon built the house. There's also some more that he builds for himself, his own house, but there's going to be more about the temple and about it being built. Remember, it did take 7.5 years, so there's a lot to build in there. But Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. So it took longer for him to do his own house. He built also the house of the forest of Lebanon. The length thereof was 100 cubits, and breadth was 50 cubits. The height thereof was 30 cubits. Upon 4 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams upon the pillars. It was covered with cedar upon the beams, that lay on 4 pillars, 15 in a row. And there were windows in 3 rows, and the light was against the light in 3 ranks. And the doors and the posts were square, with windows, and the light was against the light in 3 ranks. And he made a porch of pillars. The length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth thereof was 30 cubits. And the porch was before them, and the other pillars and the thick beam were before them. Then he made a porch for the throne, where he might judge, even the porch of judgment. It was covered with cedar from one side of the floor to the other. Now, one thing you have to remember: think about the book of Judges. When they're talking about judges, they don't just mean passing out sentences and listening to things, but it's about ruling. What's he going to do about ruling? What? It's not just talking about like judges we'd expected today, but it's a way of saying that he does everything. He leads the people from there. That's how he's doing it. His house where he dwelt had another court within the porch, which was of the like work. Solomon made also the house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken to wife, like unto his porch, unto this porch. So he's basically building 3 houses, it sounds like. One in, in one area, then his house, then the Pharaoh's daughter's house. All these were costly stone, according to the measures of hewn stone, sawed with saws, within and without, even from the foundation unto the coping, and so on the outside toward the great court. And the foundation was of costly stones, even great stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits, so quite big stones, really. Above were costly stones, after the measure of hewed stones, cedars. And the great court round about was with 3 rows of hewed stones, and the row of cedar beams, both in the inner court of the house of the Lord and the porch of the house of the Lord. Now he's talking about the house of the Lord, so there's that one as well. And King Solomon sent and fetched Hiram out of Tyre. So here we've got Hiram, he's come in to do some work. And I'm sure he didn't do all that work himself, but Hiram is going to be that main person to do these. He was a widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in brass, and he was filled with wisdom and understanding and cunning to the work to work all works in brass. And he came to King Solomon and wrought all his work. So he's well known for what he does. His father was well known for it as well. For he cast two pillars of brass of 18 cubits high apiece, so quite high again. And the line of the 12 cubits did compass either of them about. And he made two chapiters of molten brass, and that's like the top of the pillars. And if you've done your in school, when they talk about the Doric, the Ionic, and the Corinthian pillars, and it'd be the chapters on top that you'd look at of how they looked to decide what they were. And so I just was thinking about it that way when they mentioned that. The height of one of the chapiters was 5 cubits, and the height of the other chapiter was 5 cubits. And the nets of the checker work and the wreaths of chain work for the chapiters which were upon the top of the pillars, 7 for one chapiter and 7 for the other. He made the pillars and the 2 rows round about upon them, upon the network, to cover the chapiters that were upon the top with pomegranates. And so did he for the other chapiter. So I can't remember if I wrote it, where I wrote it down, but pomegranates represents the fruitfulness and things dealing with that, with being fruitful. And the chapters that were on the top of the pillars were of lily work in the porch, 4 cubits. And the chapters upon the 2 pillars had pomegranates also above, over against the belly, which was by the network, and the pomegranates were 200 in rows around about the other chapiter. And he set upon the pillars of the porch of the temple, and he set upon the right pillar and called the name thereof Jachin, and he set upon the left pillar and called the name thereof Boaz. Remember Boaz, the guy that married Ruth, or the daughter-in-law of Ruth. Sorry, my brain's going. But here it just tells us why he named him that. What were the pillars of the temple? 2 large freestanding bronze pillars stood on either side of the entrance of the temple. The pillar on the right side was inscribed with Jachin, which meant he will establish, or he establishes. The pillar on the left side inscribed the name of Boaz, which we should know from earlier, which can mean by strength or in strength. These pillars may have represented a gate through which one passed from an earthly to a holy space. And upon the top of the pillars was lily work, so the work of the pillars finished. And he made a molten sea 10 cubits from one brim to the other. It was round about around all about, and his height was 5 cubits, and the line of 30 cubits did encompass it around about. Again, if we just point here, it says, what was the molten sea on the back of 12 oxen? Solomon's temple had 10 bronze lavers along with a large molten sea, which was a bronze basin. These were used to provide water for ritual cleansing. The basin rested on the backs of 12 oxen, with 3 facing each of the cardinal directions. Today, the baptismal fonts in the houses of the Lord similarly rest upon the backs of 12 oxen. Sculptures that represent the 12 tribes of Israel, oxen sculptures that represent the 12 tribes of Israel. Oxen can also represent the strength and power of Jesus Christ. I think that's important to note. They're not there just to go, oh, well, that's just the 12 tribes of Israel. It's to remember that they are there for a reason. And that they represent that power from God. And under the brim there were knops compassing it, 10 in a cubit, compassing the sea round about. The knops were cast in rows when it was cast. And now, if you just wonder what a knop is, it's an archaic word for a knob, or a small decorative protuberance or bud. So just think of a little knob or bud. It's probably like carved to look like a flower or something that's not opened. And it stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. And it was a handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, and the flowers of lilies, which it contained 2,000 baths. So a lot of water, basically. And he made 10 bases of brass. 4 cubits was the height of one base, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, and 3 cubits the height thereof. And the work of the bases was on this manner, that they had borders, and the borders were between the ledges, and on the borders were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubims. And upon the ledges there was a base above, and beneath the lions, oxen, and oxen were certain additions made of thin work. So there was the base, but the lions and oxen were not really what it was resting on, or something like that. That's what I'm getting from it. And every base had 4 brazen wheels and plates of brass, and 4 corners thereof, and undersetters. Under the lever were undersetters molten at the side of every addition. If you don't know what an undersetter is, I put this in: supports, props, and pedestals or handles placed beneath an object to hold or carry it. So there's a way of getting these basins around, and because the molten sea, as they called it, was so big, it probably needed it. And the mouth of it within the chapiter and above was a cubit, but the mouth thereof was round after the work of the base, a cubit and a half, and also upon the mouth of it were gravings, with their borders foursquare, not round, and under the borders were 4 wheels, and the axle trees of the wheels were joined to the base, and the height of a wheel was a cubit and a half a cubit. And the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Their axle trees and their naves and their felloes and their spokes were all molten. And there were 4 undersetters to 4 corners of one base, and the undersetters were of the very base itself. And the top of the base was a round compass, a half a cubit high, and on the top of the base the ledges thereof and the borders thereof were of this same. For the plates of the ledges thereof and on the borders thereof he engraved cherubims, lions, and palm trees, according to the proportion of every one, and additions round about. After this manner he made 10 bases. All of them had 1 casting, and 1 measure, and 1 size. Then he made 10 lavers of brass. 1 laver contained 40 baths, and every laver was 4 cubits, and upon every one of the 10 bases was 1 laver. Just saying how much each one would hold. And he put 5 bases on the right side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house, and he set the sea on the right side of the house, eastward over against the south. And Hiram made the lavers and the shovels and the basins. So Hiram made an end of doing all the work he made King Solomon for the house of the Lord. The 2 pillars and the 2 bowls of the chapiters that were on the top of the 2 pillars, and the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the chapiters, which were upon the top of the pillars, and 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, even 2 rows of pomegranates for 1 network to cover 2 bowls of the chapiters that were upon the pillars. And if we look here, like I said, with the pomegranates, it's fruitfulness, God's blessings, and the abundance of the promised land. It always sounds better when I read it, I think, sometimes. The 10 bases and the 10 levers on the bases, and 1 sea and 12 oxen under the sea, and the pots and the shovels and the basins and all the vessels which Hiram made to King Solomon for the house of the Lord were of bright brass. And the plain of Jordan, in the plain of Jordan did the king cast them, and the clay ground between Succoth and Zoran. And Solomon left all the vessels unweighed, because they were exceedingly many. Neither was the weight of the brass found out. So there was a lot there, and it was a lot of work. And Solomon made all the vessels that pertained to the house of the Lord. The altar of gold and the table of gold were upon the showbread, whereupon the showbread was, and the candlesticks of pure gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, before the oracle, and the flowers and lamps, and the tongues of gold, and the bowls and the snuffers, and the basins and the spoons and the censers of pure gold, and hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner house and the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house, to wit, of the temple. So was ended the work that King Solomon made for the house of the Lord, and Solomon brought in things which David his father had dedicated. Even the silver and the gold and the vessels did he put among the treasures of the house of the Lord. So a lot of work. You can see the detail that they're trying to put into this and what it means to have this temple already. And so they're going to finish up, and then they have to dedicate it. And we'll get that next time.